Elephants in the Boardroom is brought to you by our friends at Achilles. Achilles is a sustainability supply chain risk management company. Achilles supports the world's biggest companies to create and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent supply chains. So while we navigate our way through the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles are leading the way, helping businesses navigate the risks and opportunities associated with many of these grey elephants. If you're a person who's interested in the impact of change on your supply chains or ESG strategy, it's worth speaking to Achilles. So head over to achilles.com.
Welcome to Elephants in the Boardroom, the podcast where we think about the future, about the disruptive forces that are shaping it, and look for the opportunities for ourselves, for our businesses, for the whole of society. Thank you for joining us. My name is Graham Codrington. I'm based in Johannesburg, which means I am freezing my toes off in a fairly cold winter. As always, I'm joined by my colleague Dean, who's on the other side of the world, I think, enjoying a nice warm summer. Dean?
Hi, Graham. Yeah, Dean Van Leeuwen here. Summer's been pretty good in the UK so far, although the rain has started to arrive. So we're feeling like we're a bit back to normal than we were over the last few weeks. Yeah, Graham, let's just remind our audiences what grey elephants are. Yeah, these are they're visible. They're the high impact forces of progress, forces of change, which are largely being ignored. And there are 7 of these grey elephants which are converging, they're colliding, they're coming together, and they're creating this once-in-a-century transformation. And we like to keep our eye on our radar just to see what's coming. What are the weak signals? What's telling us of what the disruption that's approaching? What might be new that business leaders need to be thinking about as they really navigate through this once-in-a-century transformation? So, Graham, what's on your radar? What have you been picking up over the past month?
Well, Dean, this month, it's not something that sort of just arrived on the radar and sort of pinging an alert signal. This one is one of those bits of sleeper data that's sort of sitting there waiting to be noticed. And that really, I suppose, qualifies exactly as an elephant in the boardroom. And the data point that took me down a bit of a rabbit hole this past week is that Africa has 60% of the world's arable land that isn't being used yet for developing crops. So of all the countries in the world where there's farmland available, 60% of unused farmland is available in Africa. And part of the problem that Africa has, because you can't just say, oh, well, that's an amazing resource, go for it. It is an amazing resource. I think it's as powerful a resource as finding new oil reserves or finding, new underground rare earth minerals. What's on top of the ground in Africa is incredibly powerful as well, because where, for example, Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe, maybe Africa could be the breadbasket of the world in the future. But here's the problem. At the moment, even with its existing crops, Africa loses about 40% of all of everything that's harvested across the continent. Obviously, some countries are better than others. I wouldn't imagine any other wine farms down in the Cape in South Africa have this problem. I would hope not as well. But the problem is in Africa that you don't have decent storage facilities. So a crop that is harvested that then needs to be stored for whatever reason, either refrigerated or not, there isn't enough storage capacity. And then the logistics are not in place. And I think this would be especially true across the countries in Central Africa. The roads are bad. There isn't much rail infrastructure. So getting the crops to the market is a problem. So the issue with Africa is that you've got this massive opportunity. The land is sitting there. You would certainly have farmers who would be keen to farm this land. But what we need is three things. We need local processing and storage facilities. We need to invest in the transportation and logistics infrastructure to be able to transport all of this. And then I think we would would need to empower local farmers with microfinancing and access to international markets. So for me, there's the opportunity to add a lot more capacity to the world's agricultural sector and be one of the ways in which anybody who has an interest in uplifting Africa, maybe this is a way to uplift Africa, that it's there. We know it's there. We can see that it's there, but maybe it's one of those elephants in the boardroom that we haven't been taking seriously enough.
Graham, I think that's an amazing insight because we talk about the big squeezes and, we moved from a period of abundance in towards a period of strategic scarcity, and food scarcity is going to be one of the big challenges facing humanity over the next decade or so. So, Africa positioning itself to almost feed the world. I remember growing up in the 80s and it was all about how do we feed Africa? And that could turn right on its head and Africa could start feeding the world. I think it's a really great sort of story. I like the thinking, I like the sentiment and the mindset shift here that's happening. Because, a few months ago we saw Donald Trump cutting aid to Africa. And it just shows you the resourcefulness of people in Africa and even, around the world who go, we can turn this into an advantage. So I like that. And that's all really, what we talk about these gray elephants is about looking at them and saying, well, how do we create the future? Rather than just sit here and be a passive bystander as the future happens around us. Let's think about how we can use these forces to really create a positive future, because the future doesn't just happen. People create the future. So, really nice one, Graham.
Absolutely. And there's so many stories across Africa of young innovators doing remarkable things. There's this wonderful story of a guy who built his own windmill from scratch, using information he found on YouTube and not only supplied water for the farm that he had created, but linked up a generator and supplied electricity to his local village. If we see Africa not as this continent, this dark continent of desperation, but rather a continent of young innovators who are just desperate for that little break, a little bit of financing, a little bit of support, the small little access to a market. Who knows where we could see Africa going over the next years and decades? Yeah,
60% of arable land, that's huge. I think Africa should be thinking big. It's not just going to be microfinancing, and we need to think big about how supply chains can shift. Think of our partner here, Achilles, who are supply chain and ESG experts. We need to think about what needs to change in the supply chain. Last week, I went to the week before that, the Festival of Speed in Goodwood. They've got a big hall where they show things about the future, and they had amazing robotics, and the one big feature was the drones that they're using in farms, in arable farming, in drones. And you can imagine, the entrepreneurs and investors in Africa saying, we're going to invest in drones to help turn 60% of this arable land into, food to feed the world. I think Africa could think big and jump ahead of the curve here. Exciting things there. So what's on my radar? So this week, the S&P 500 has just soared to record highs. It's rising. It's dropped a little bit, but yesterday it was over 6,300 points, and that's a 26% surge in only 3 months. This is not just another market rally. It's among the most powerful 3-month performances in the index's entire history. Okay. So investors are celebrating. Nearly 88% of companies are beating earning expectations. Retail sales are outpacing forecasts. Jobless claims are dropping. Clear signals of near-term economic strength. Okay. So things look rosy. But hang on, with all of this talk about this once-in-a-century transformation and the greatest sort of economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution, there's got to be some risk embedded here. So why are the markets so exuberant, why so upbeat about this? So what we're seeing is that the market is effectively already priced these gains of AI and digital disruption. They've already priced it into their expectations. And the global AI market is expected to double in 2 years, so reaching over 300 billion by the end of this year, and potentially adding 13 trillion to the world economy by 2030. So happy days, okay? Let's just keep doing what we're doing, but that wouldn't be addressing the elephant in the room. Okay, so this is why this matters. Okay, so whilst the markets they've done the seamless leap into the AI-powered future, studies are showing that 90% of C-suite leaders believe their organization is not truly ready for AI disruption. Okay, so we've got the market going crazy, pricing this in, but when we speak to business leaders, they're going, all right. And only 1% of leaders consider their company mature in AI deployment. So the real elephant in the room, I think, is that leaders are treating artificial intelligence, which is arguably the most transformative technology in a century, as a tool to do the same things, just faster and cheaper, rather than as a catalyst to completely reimagine what is possible. It's kind of like going back 100 years, I think, to the last great industrial transformation. And instead of embracing the automobile for its revolutionary potential, simply strapping your horse to the front of it and calling it progress. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. Despite the monumental advances, most organizations still approach AI with a mindset that's locked into past paradigms, optimizing for efficiency and cost, while missing the opportunities for reinvention and breakthrough value creation. Yeah, that's what's been on my radar. And what we're seeing is that the digital AI transformation efforts, over 40% of these projects are failing at the moment. So on one side, we've got the markets being very buoyant, and the other side, the leaders are saying, so what should we be doing about this? I think... Any thoughts, Graham? I'll tell you what I think the sort of strategic response should be.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because you would have thought that stock markets in the world would be absolutely tanking at the moment, with Trump's tariffs. And by the time people listen to this podcast, who knows what will have happened? Because between the time of recording, and this could literally be 3 hours later, or whether it's 3 days, 3 weeks, who knows what's going on? But there's complete chaos in the market. But clearly, the market itself has just factored that in, right? And it's basically saying, you know what? We'll come right on the other side of that. We don't have to worry. Look at Israel's stock market. You would think a complete war zone. It also is going to record highs at the moment. So at the moment, the stock markets of the world, their valuations don't seem to be based on underlying realities, but rather on hopes and promises. And I agree with you. I think it's the hope and promise that AI will come in and bring massive leaps forward in productivity and hopefully massive leaps forward in innovation. Dean, you and I have a slight disagreement on this. We come from different angles. I'm not as convinced as the market is that AI will be the answer and will bring everything that it's promising. But I do understand that those people who are invested in the market are invested in technology being the driver of that market for the next 2 to 3 years. We'll see what happens. I still think it's a very nerve-wracking time to be an investor at the moment because a lot of market movement is not actually related to what's happening in the world. But driven, whether it's from meme stocks to hopes and dreams of AI, buyer beware, as they say. But I think you're right in your analysis, Dean, that it's the technology hype that's driving this.
And I think the potential is there, Graham. I agree with you. I think the elephant to me in the room is that leaders, C-suites, aren't looking at the potential and really grasping it and engaging with it. They're tinkering around the edges.
No, exactly. Sorry to interrupt, because that's another huge point that we mustn't miss. And maybe if my whole life depended on an investment strategy, I would probably take the time to have a look at just how invested the CEO of a company is in AI himself or herself. Because I think there's a lot of talk in boardrooms and at CEO breakfasts and wine clubs about AI this, AI that. But I bet you that most CEOs are not actually incorporating AI personally into their own lives. And I think that there's a personal mismatch between what we are saying and hoping for and then what we're actually doing. So I just wanted to add that data point as well, Dean, that I think we can see it personally in the CEOs themselves. And then also, I agree with you, we can see it in their strategies as well. They're saying something, but they're actually not all into it, are they?
Absolutely. I reckon we could bring 10 CEOs into this room, onto this podcast, and we could ask them to define what agentic AI is, and the majority of them would get it wrong. Because people just don't really, they're buzzwords, there's hype. And the reality is, so you were right, we've got to confront this readiness gap. We've got to stop tinkering. We've got to establish systematic, bold, board-level commitment to digital and AI transformation. I think that's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to refocus leaders, invest in growing leaders, helping them to understand how AI can drive. And it's not just about taking what we're doing today and digitizing it. There needs to be continuous learning, real engagement. We need to champion its use, and we need to reimagine what AI can do for us. The last 100 years ago, the last once-in-a-century great transformation. Henry Ford didn't invent the car. He didn't even invent the production line. But he reimagined the business models and used the technology of his era to totally disrupt and change how the world works. And the leaders who get ahead in this new rare opportune moment and live up to the expectations of the markets will be those who understand that. It's about redefining your business as a bionic business, not just digitizing old processes. It's about using it as a catalyst to reinvent new business models. And I think build culture of anti-fragility, collaboration, rapid learning. No one knows what the future is going to look like. We don't know how this is going to play out. Most organizations are going to fail to transform, not because of the technology. The technology is there. It's because the cultural and leadership shortcomings. That's why we're seeing this disconnect between what the market is pricing and what leaders are playing. So elephant in the room is not merely leadership complacency. I think it's the existential delusion amongst executives who remain convinced that the organizations can navigate the most significant technological transformation since the Industrial Revolution whilst maintaining business as usual. Each month we do a quiz, okay? And it's my turn to see if I can catch you out. Well, not catch you up.
The tone of your voice means you've gone one level up again. This is turning into a crazy match between us of trying to catch each other out. Let's go for it. I'm ready.
The answers are actually in this podcast. I've actually given you the answers. So if you were listening carefully, you will actually have the answers here. So no pressure. All right. So I've come across some research from McKinsey, and they've discovered that there is a certain percentage, and I want you to think about I want you to tell me what this percentage is. Okay. So there's a percentage of leaders who consider their organizations mature in AI deployment. And mature means fully integrated into workflows with substantial business outcomes. All right. So my question to you is, what percentage of leaders consider their organizations mature in AI deployment? Is it A, 1%, B, 10%, C, 25%, or D, 82%? So 1%, 10%, 25%, 82%.
I'm desperately holding myself back from being cheeky and rude about CEOs and CEO delusion. because often with these surveys that people send out, you know, the CEOs know that they're going to be quoted in a McKinsey report, and you know, they tend to speak themselves up. But on the other hand, this particular question, and I think you were quite careful in, or at least McKinsey was careful in how they framed it, because it's their perception of the maturity of AI implementation. To be honest, the correct answer should be 1%. I would probably say the correct answer should be 0%. I'm not sure whether that's what CEOs self-reported. I'll be quite impressed if they were that honest with themselves. I'd guess 1% is the reality. So that I'm going to go with it, because that's the reality. That's the reality, right? What they said, I don't know. You tell me.
1%. Spot on. That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. 1% of organizations today feel that they are ready, that they are matured, that they are capitalizing on this.
And I suppose, Dean, part of that does make sense, right? I mean, generative AI has only been around for just coming on to 3 years, although AI itself obviously has been around longer in the thinking.
We've been talking about it for 10, 15 years. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe this is, in fact, then, Dean, a good example of literally the whole point of this podcast is that we can, in fact, say things quite confidently about the future. Things like water scarcity is going to be a problem in the future. We can say that with absolute certainty. Food security is going to be a problem. Logistics is going to become more difficult. These are things we can say with certainty. We can't be specific about the thing that we are certain about, but we can say, and we should have been saying for 5 or 10 years, what will your company do when you have the technical ability to do deep predictive data analytics, to do machine learning, to do digital automation, not robotic automation, that's been around for long enough, but now digital automation of heuristics and algorithms of the people who are the knowledge workers in your business. Those are questions you should already have been asking 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now you've got a piece of technology, a generative AI large language model that can help you to deliver that. But you should have been thinking about this long before now. Only 1% of companies apparently have been doing that. Yeah, nice one. Nice one.
So to the senior leaders listening to this podcast, you know, all companies are investing in AI. You know, we know that. There's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of money being pumped into AI. Okay. But the research is showing that the biggest barriers to scaling is not employees. They are ready for this. The employees are ready for this. It's the leaders who are not steering fast enough. So talk about investing in AI. Actually go out there and start doing things with it. Reimagine, create new models, and don't just go and digitize what you're doing. You're going to fall way behind the curve if that's all you're doing. So let's take a break. When we come back, we will be talking to rugby legend Tony Underwood. Tony represented England and the British and Irish Lions, 27 caps for his country. He played a pivotal role in England's 1995 Grand Slam and Rugby World Cup campaigns. He thrilled fans worldwide with his electrifying pace and unforgettable tries. I'm really looking forward to speaking to Tony, and he's going to be talking to us about care. How leaders can build high-performance teams through caring. And I think it's a wonderful angle as we think about these grey elephants and how they are changing with the angry planets and rising rage and big squeezes that we see in supply chains. And this concept of caring for your stakeholders, your communities. Tony's going to give us some insights there. So we'll have a quick break. Please come back.
If you feel like change is happening faster than your ability to keep up, you're not alone. At Tomorrow Today Consulting, we've worked with hundreds of leaders who felt exactly the same way until they learned how to spot the big changes coming before their competitors did. Here's what we've discovered. The companies thriving right now aren't the ones with the best products. They're actually the ones who saw the disruption coming and positioned themselves ahead of it. And that's what our grey elephants radar and framework is all about. We've helped, for example, a global mining company rethink its entire strategy to navigate economic volatility and local unrest, shifting from reactive operations to long-term resilience, and at the same time delivering unprecedented profits. We worked with a major UK retailer, for example, to turn growing pressure around plastic pollution into a powerful brand differentiator, transforming a risk into a sustainable leadership story. So, whether it's through our Skunkworks innovation labs, keynote presentations and workshops, or our strategic consulting, we're here to turn uncertainty into competitive advantage. So if you're tired of playing catch up with change, visit our website, tomorrowtoday.consulting, because the future belongs to the leaders who see it coming.
Well, welcome back. So very excited about this conversation. Joining us is rugby legend Tony Underwood, England international and British and Irish Lions. Tony, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. You must be enjoying the current tests in Australia.
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much. And I'm enjoying the accents I'm hearing on the other side of this call right now, because I think we've suffered at the hands of you guys quite a bit. But I know, Dean, we've half adopted you over in the UK, haven't we? So, but yeah, the Australia series is going well for us.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, Tony, you played a pivotal role in England's 1995 Grand Slam and Rugby World Cup campaigns, and I have it under great authority that, YouTube authority, I understand, that you winked at All Black Jonah Lomu at the 1995 World Cup semi-final.
I don't know where that has come from. I think it's just gone into sort of the house. How do you don't have to do anything to wind up Jonah Lomu when you're about to play him in a World Cup semi-final. So why would I go and do that? I honestly could say that what I did was, as we do, we match ourselves up in the haka, and he was lined up against me doing his thing. And I had the privilege of facing the haka a couple of times. And for me, it had always been, I love it. I love the aspect that it brings to the game. I love the challenge that it lays down, and obviously no bigger than Jonah, but also just it was an acknowledgement of respect for the fact that, yeah, thank you very much. In the spirit to which the challenge was laid down to me, it's accepted. But he obviously had in his mind how he wanted to accept anything that I tried to gesture towards him. And he was going to do what he was going to do anyway, I think. But obviously, not a good game for us that day.
Yeah, it's one of the epic classic games, isn't it? And everything, regardless of which side you were on, it's one that will be remembered, into eternity. So Tony, you're not just a star winger. After hanging up your boots, you launched a remarkable second career as a long-haul captain piloting giant A380s for Emirates. What was that like? And what is it like transitioning from rugby to flying some of the world's biggest planes?
It's very different, but I think what helped me make the transition was because it was very different. I think most people will have seen with ex-athletes, whatever their sport, the transition period out of sport. And to be honest, it's not just sport. Anything that we all do for a long period of time where there's a sense of your identity could get laid upon the action, the activity you're doing, and rugby being one of those things, meant that it's very hard to shed that, and it's very hard to move on, and very hard to kind of not lose yourself in that previous role. The thing about flying being so different, it made for, I guess, an easier transition for me, and something that you have to get your stuck into, and your focus needs to be on it. So I couldn't dwell on what had gone. It had to be focused on what was coming next. And I think perhaps we can all, I benefited from that. And I think in some ways, we can all benefit from having that drive and focus, if you like, on something new rather than dwelling too much on the past.
Absolutely. I think there's some wonderful lessons about how you pivot in new environments and new teams. I think I know Graham's got a few questions he'd like to ask you around that. But today you're Chief Care Enforcer at Belief Solutions, and you're focusing on building high-performance teams in entirely new environments. So you're quite a reinventor, aren't you, Tony?
Well, thank you. But I think the irony is that title was only because I've come into the world of business from outside of it, seen all these titles that people give themselves, didn't really resonate with any of them, felt like I was doing any of those things that they described. And in terms of reinvention, in some ways, the title was self-entitled, obviously, with the mentality of actually touching upon. I said avoid dwelling on your past, but actually there are parts of your past that you can learn from and understand how you can benefit from going forward. And that was actually touching upon, my involvement in high performing teams. If the title comes from is a sense of what it takes to be part of a high performing team, and having care at the forefront is in its different ways. It was something that I felt attuned to, what I can do going forward and how I can help people going forward. And the enforcement bit is because sometimes you wouldn't think so, but quite often you go into environments and you do have to enforce it, because even though people common sense wise think it's a good thing to do, it's very hard for them to actually put into practice. So how can I help them to do that?
Yeah, Tony, I think it's fascinating, those transitions, each one of them. And although this isn't a sports podcast, both Dean and I are huge sports fans. And I'm interested, and this is almost maybe as an aside, but my guess would be that as you've watched professional sport since you were playing and now, that idea of caring for people who are in high performance environments, that feels to me as that's been a big shift in professional sports over the last few years. And I think equally, it's probably a shift that the business world is needing to take, maybe more than they think they do. I think the business world might have told themselves, we care for our people maybe more than a professional sports team might, but I'm not sure that they do. I'm not sure if there's a question in there specifically, but it's just reflecting on what was it like when you were a player, and then what's it like now, sort of bringing some of those mindsets into the business world.
Yeah, I think the transition really is that people talk about it, the importance about care, and they'll put up slogans, they'll put up values and mission statements about it. They'll even put policies out there. The difference being is that, and that's why the enforcement bit you need to have a fierce care mentality about it. You need to care about caring. You need to understand the difference it can make and actually live it. So the old adage about it's not just, about making sure that you walk the talk. And when I see it in sport, I think it's very hard. It's very hard from the outside to know what's going on in these environments. Unless you're in those dressing room walls and in the meeting rooms, you can guess. And it's the same in any organizations and businesses. You can guess what it's like inside. The reality is, unless you're walking inside those rooms and actually feeling that culture, and feeling is a very important aspect about the importance of care, is because how you make people feel and whether they're engaged and committed to what you're doing is what is essentially we're trying to achieve, and bringing people together as a team, getting them to do more than they think they're possible, helping them to be better versions of themselves, excelling. It's by caring for people in that fierce care mentality that allows us to go there. It's interesting. I think the word permission comes up quite a bit when I talk about this with people, because it almost feels like people are waiting for permission to do it because they want to. And you're right, it is a business podcast, this, but, I'm sure there's elements of sport you guys have touched upon in your previous episodes. And because it's inbuilt in you are sports mad. There'll be aspects of sport that you definitely will bring through into your business lives. And there's so much you can learn, because a high-performing environment is something that people, how do you create one is a really important thing to be able to address and bring, because there's very few businesses that don't have people in it. And when you've got people in them and you've got to understand how to create performance from them, sport is a wonderful way to help you to do that, because the reality is you have to there. In business, you can kind of get away with the apathy about it, and you can kind of get away with saying you're going to do it. It's the ones that lean into it and almost like take permission to lean into it and go for it.
So, Tony, we've spoken in the past. The one thing that's always stood out for me is how you've talked about care differentiating or elevating high performance teams. kind of being the difference between a high performer and a non-performer, or one of the contributors to that high performance. And as we like to look at these sort of grey elephant forces, these big forces which are changing the world, and AI is changing how people work. And the key thing here is, and there's a lot of focus on the technology. There's a lot of focus on automation, replacing people, people losing their jobs. And that seems to be where the sort of spotlight is. But the reality is actually, as we move into a more digital, AI-driven world, the importance of caring for people and helping them to find their place in this new world, I would imagine becomes even more important. What are you seeing?
Crucial. I think I love the way you describe the things. I know we've had this chat before, and this sense of, again, likening to what sport does, is how you proactive about something in the future. As much as possible, you want to create an environment where you're making really good decisions under pressure. But the other things is, how can you preempt things, and how can you proactively set yourself up to ultimately be making those good decisions, or get your organization at a good position down the road. That's what we do in teams. That's the culture we create, is to do that because people are involved. And to your point, yes, I think pretty much most of the things in your 7 elephants, there are people involved in it. And it's all about change as well. And, we'll talk about, I forget the name of it, but the Kubler-Ross change curves and all that sort of stuff. The reality is, how people feel and how people are taken through change and their different emotions that they take through feel is something you've got to address. And it's something you've got to prepare people for, to either help prepare them for the change, help them to cope with the change, and help them to be ready when change comes. When it's not intentional, when it's something that is a surprise. But what I love about you guys is talking about, how can you cover your aces? How can you think what's going to happen halfway through the second half, and how can you be ready for that, such that, when Joan is on his 4th try, have you got a game plan for it?
But the Springboks, I think, learned from
the Springboks learned for
your
sure
game in the semi. But they were able to observe, weren't they? They were able to look at the environment, and they knew how Joe Malone was going to respond. And that's the amazing thing about creating the future. And we often say, the most powerful way to predict the future is to create it. And I think that's what the Springboks did in 95. They looked at how they contained or they used the massive force of Joe Malone to their own advantage. And that's how that game played. And they then created the positive future. And I think that's how we look at these grey elephants. We say that they're not invisible. They're elephants in the boardroom. We know they're there, but we're choosing to ignore them. So what can we do? And I love your ideas around care and how that can work. Because let's take aging populations. We know that the global workforce is aging dramatically, and increasingly we're going to see multi-generational teams. So how do we tailor sort of fierce care to meet the diverse needs, expectation, motivations across age groups? What are your practical steps do you see that leaders can take to ensure that younger and more aged staff feel valued and cared for as we move through these seismic shifts over the next sort of 5-10 years?
I think to the lens of care and feeling and needs. So I look across your elephants, and this one in particular as a sort of niche area that you focus on, about who the stakeholder is and who you need to influence and who you need to be considering about what their needs are. It goes across all your elephants. How can you look at the risk and the opportunity of these stakeholders that are influenced by this, and how can you have a game plan? How can you prepare for the needs of those individuals? So as an organization, what is your demographic? What is the demographic of the people that you do want to have in the future coming into your workforce? And how are you going to prepare for it? The reality is, as we get older, and I think you shared some statistics with me, I think at some time, didn't you, Dean? But I might have seen it elsewhere. But the reality is, the average age of us passing is getting older, and the quality of our lives and how we spend our lives as we get older is different. So our needs as a result are different. And so engaging to those needs and caring about those needs and how they can be fulfilled means maybe a seismic shift in how we think about, is retirement a 65 years old thing? And also, do we use the word retirement? Again, we talked about transition earlier. There was this really horrible statistic with flying that the average age of a pilot of passing away was at the time was almost 1 or 2 years after retirement, which is a horrible statistic when you think about it. But then tunes into the aspect of without motivation, without fulfillment, without purpose or other aspects, what is your purpose almost and what are you doing? So I often try and avoid the word retirement with people and actually think of it as a transition. And people I speak to talk about an encore. Okay, an encore about, well, okay, maybe you don't do it to the same length with the same number of hours a week as you were before. Maybe we cut back and we look at the different type of work we expect our people to do when they're in the 60s and the 70s, and is it work? But whatever that activity is it a productive thing for them as people? And then how can we translate that being productive for us as communities and societies?
So, Tony, obviously in your first profession, let's call it that, as a professional athlete, you always knew that there was going to be a short lifespan, right? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So you've been forced to maybe do this transition thing, and it's not, for you, it's not even an encore. It's just the next thing and the next thing. But I actually think that might be a pattern for other people to think about more deliberately. So it isn't just you have a career and then you want a little bit more. What have you learnt by making 3 quite significant transitions, completely different careers in completely different industries? As you reflect on that, is there anything that you've learnt that you can share with the rest of us who might be thinking about doing something similar?
Quite honestly, both of them were kind of enforced. The first one, because I got getting slower and getting caught by the big guys, so it was time to stop as the speed sort of started dwindling. COVID brought an end to my aviation career, or at least it brought an abrupt halt to it. And then a decision I made was not to go back to it when the restrictions started lifting and the opportunity started coming back to go back to my career. I made a decision not to. And I think the learning point from it was in that point when it was enforced upon me second time round, there was probably, I guess, a sense of discomfort or a sense of, Am I doing what I really want to do? Am I really feeling fulfillment and purpose in this job? Am I just existing in a comfort zone? And I see that a lot around me where it's easy not to change. And in fact, and I'm sure you guys talk about this, one of the decisions you make is not to change. And, it's one of your options, if you like. So the easy one to make is not to change and just to keep going with what you are. One of the things with having enforced changes, and I think quite a few people after COVID or during COVID went through maybe a similar transition with the way that they're thinking about, do you know what is it I want to do? Is what I was doing before in that career fulfilling me in the way I was? And I could tell it hadn't. And so it was quite an easy decision for me to make not to go back into it. So it's asking those questions about what aspects of the work that you're doing is fulfilling you as a person. And there's coaching out there that provides for that, with that sense of, wagon wheels of life and family, friends, your hobbies, your pastimes, your giving back and your volunteering. What aspects of your life are you ticking, and where are you just coasting? And having a sense of challenging that, and having a sense of a growth mindset to say, could I do better? And sometimes it's not a radical change, but sometimes change is good.
Does it get easier if you do it again and again, or is it always a little bit nerve-wracking?
Yeah, well, there was about a 20-year gap between those two, Dean. So I think there was, and age and a few more grey hairs helped with. It definitely helps with perspective and helps with a sense of a better understanding about self-awareness and what is it that makes you tick. As you said, when you got that under your hood, if you like, that decision helps. But having said that, I think the reality of most, the generation, I don't know what generation letter we're on at the moment. Did I hear it was an A? The likelihood is a lot of people nowadays are perhaps going to be an average of 7 different occupations, let alone companies, but different occupations might well be the average that people go through. Opportunities for change are there. People's understanding of the transferable skills that we have. And again, it comes back to this point is as people, much more focus on what skills we have as people in terms of our character and our disposition, as opposed to our technical skills.
So, Tony, you talk about retirement almost as being an encore, and we all absolutely agree with you. I think if we were going to make one prediction here about the future, it's that retirement is going to disappear, or we're going to have to reimagine what retirement means. When living to 100 starts to become normal, and that's certainly what the predictions are, then you can't retire when you're 65, and you have to think about that next period in your life as an encore. We know that businesses are going to struggle to find and retain talent. There's talk of AI and automation filling some of the productivity gap. But, robots don't buy products. So, people are still going to be central to this whole equation. And we need to ensure that our workforces are productive, that they are fulfilled, that they believe in what they're doing, and that we help them through this transition. So if we see a world where people aren't really retiring, or they're reimagining what retirement is, there has to be a role for organizations to really care deeply about their people, to really help them to manage this transition. And it actually starts to become good business sense to do that. This is not something that's warm and fuzzy and a nice to have. And as you say, it's a corporate value that we put up on a poster on the wall. This is actually becoming business imperative stuff. Would you agree with that?
Yes, skills gap and the talent gap, etc., is a massive issue. I know that addressed a lot of organizations that I see as well. The thing about this, and I know you guys, is it intelligent advances? That's one of your elephants, the whole AI aspect. And well, I have a line about AI, and I know you guys talked about agentic AI recently and stuff. But as far as I understand so far, one thing AI can't do is EI, emotional intelligence, and the human element, although who knows, over time that will happen. But the use of automation and the use of intelligence in that way, and the people element to do that, is a skill set which, why does that age? That shouldn't age. And as we get older and have a better, I think, capability as we get older, why should that stop at 65? How much more has people still got to give in that aspect without the the physical laboring that they might not be able to do at a younger age, but there's definitely a mental sort of aspect that they can still be giving for quite a bit of ages. So a different perspective about how we look at a workforce, should it stop at 65? And then you start leaning into providing an encore for people who, I spoke to a lawyer recently, and he didn't want to go. He was just finding different ways because there was so much purpose in his role, in his work, that he just didn't want to leave. But they wanted to create opportunities for partnerships for younger kids. But finding something for someone who wanted to give, and almost you worried what the emptiness almost in his life would be in his encore. Why can't organizations play a role in that encore in a different way and being imaginative about it in terms of, hopefully make it a win-win-win for the needs of all, and caring for the needs of all stakeholders to make it work. And I think finding a role and being imaginative and being innovative about the role that could be played by an aging population is a crucial aspect, one of which is mentoring as much as anything else. One of the things you see a lot of as well is as the younger force comes in and a lot of work from home or AI and speaking like this in meetings, etc., online, is that lack of connection. Well, mentorship from an aging population to help a younger population coming into the workforce to understand and learn in that way is in a coaching role, almost a mentorship role, is, I think, one way that could help bridge that sort of, the needs there.
So absolutely. I think aging, AI, these are, and that integration, these are definitely sort of elephants in the boardroom. We know that our workforces are getting older. We know that people don't want to retire, or they can't retire because they're living longer. They don't have the money. But businesses really aren't doing enough to address it. But I like this idea that you have, Tony, that just by showing a bit more empathy, a bit more caring, you can find these solutions. You can reimagine how we work together And the great thing about caring, as well, put out there to the C-suites and boards out there, is that that's not going to cost you any more money. Caring doesn't, it's not going to hit the bottom line. if anything, it's going to hit the bottom line in a positive way.
Well, I tell you, Dean, where it does. There's a riposte that people have about, and there is a cost to its time. They think about care takes time. And there obviously is, as a business is time is money. Now, my riposte to that is, sorry, I've been on a Lions tour, and there's a Lions tour going on right now. We've had a bunch of people kicking the proverbial out of each other for 4 years. And in a very short space of time, we've been able to get over that, find a common purpose in the ground by caring about each other's needs as a group, and finding common purpose to that need, and going on to take the Springboks of the world and now the Wallabies in a very short space of time. I've had airline crew, when I was flying as a long-haul pilot, 26 strangers. I'd never met these people before. Every time you go flying, many cultures, different backgrounds, etc., different age demographic, mostly a lot younger than me. And how long would I have in a crew room before we went to the aeroplane as a group? We had 3 minutes. So people, don't give me I'm not going to swear, but don't give me that about time. If you are fiercely care about caring and you're intentional, it's in the moment. It's not big gestures. Common courtesy, common manners, common caring for the value of your people, and how can you help them be better versions? How can you help them excel? The mentor talked to me about giving them hope, help other people excel. You can do that in moments. You can be there for people in moments. So don't hide behind the time argument, okay? Because I don't buy it.
Yeah, I love that thought, Tony, but it strikes me as I'm thinking about the three environments you've been in, and what you've said about them, that two things are working next to each other. The one is there's a system in place that allows you to do that caring, to do that leadership, to do that mentoring and that coaching. And then there's a personal decision to do it. And both of those need to be in place. I don't know if that's true. Maybe let me phrase that as a question, that you've got to have the structure in place to understand this is a requirement. This team needs to work. You need to care for each other. You need to work together. But then you've still got to make that choice as an individual in that system to then make it a priority.
You're absolutely right, Graham. But I would say that, well, what is the process? What is the system? It's the culture. It's the environment you create in that organization. And to the point about the decision to do it, you're absolutely right. But this is where leadership comes in, to model that way, to show, because you're bought into the importance of it. That culture won't be there unless you buy into the importance of the understanding what a difference it can make for your organization about caring. As you said, the process and the system needs to be there. I've been in plenty of rugby teams where they didn't give a monkeys about you as a person. You were number 14 playing in this team. I don't care what's going on in your life or how you come here. I just needed to do your job. Okay. So that it's not always the way. Going on an aeroplane, the system and the process, the only system and the process that is there is that my cabin crew know what their role is on this job. My first officer knows what his role is on this aeroplane. The culture of care and the environment to create that culture and to operate in this way, with this mindset and this way of being, that's an individual decision as a leader to create that culture around whatever system you. Often in companies, and then this is where leadership has to happen in spite of the environments that companies and organizations create. And that would be true of some of my organizations in flying. The culture of the organization didn't give a monkeys about you as a person. You were a widget. You're a company staff number. I had intentionally had to create the culture from a flight from here to Joburg. It was me intentionally with that crew to create that environment and culture with that group. So you have it within yourselves as leaders to be able to do that in spite of the culture you're operating in.
So Tony, there's a paradox there, isn't it? Because as we move towards a more digital, technology-enabled, automated world, it always feels as if the human element is becoming more and more important and more powerful. And for me, that's the elephant in the boardroom. I think many leaders are failing to recognize just how important people, culture, the right kind of leadership is going to be as we transition towards this AI-driven world. And to me, that's the profound elephant in the boardroom, that one that we really need to tackle.
I think I agree with what Dean is saying there, that I think too many leaders, and by leaders I don't necessarily mean just executive leaders, but a manager of a team, are hoping that the next big thing is going to be productivity gains because of AI and technology. But whether that happens or not, I'm still a bit skeptical personally. But I think the next big thing is making sure that we get the most out of the people in the system, whatever
absolutely,
that system is. And I think there's some basic humanity that's probably been true for centuries. But those people who have lived part of their lives in high performance environments, like yourself, I think have some insights in how do you get the best out of people who are already the best. And I think that's a very human thing, actually.
The difficulty with care and difficulty of productivity of people is it's really hard unless to actually measure how much better someone could have done if they were actually committed to this role as opposed to just being compliant to this role, task that you've given them. So in sport, it's very evident whether this team has come together because you've got a finite result of win and lose. In business, there's no finite number of what you could have achieved if these people could have been more productive. And how do you know whether they could have been more productive? It's very hard to say. Okay. So, and I'm sure there's barometers that you put out like employment surveys, etc. Well, let's face it, anyone can say what they want on those things. It's very hard to actually really understand, which is even more of a reason to have a proclivity to say, we need to care about our people and understand where the common sense says if I care about them, I'm more likely to have a more productive workforce because they're more likely to care about being here and as part of this organization. And to their sense of the AI, whether it can be more productive, again, and that's the same thing. The only thing I've learned about AI is the prompt. The quality of what you get out is reflected in the quality of what you put in. So always the people element of it. So what you do and how algorithms are written, etc., to do stuff with your language models and your AI, etc., it's always people behind it. And how can we help them be more productive? I think one thing you touched upon, Dean, I just want to talk about it, is this technology aspects as well. And I mentioned about working from home. This lack of connectivity we have as people as well is a drawback. I had it from the aspect on the aeroplane. I had a closed flight deck door, so I couldn't even get to my crew there to be, literally blockaded away from me. But it's beholden on people then to create the time for that human connection. So what I mean by that is if you're gathering in a boardroom because you've actually got your people together, what are you doing for the 5-10 minutes before you actually start the business at hand? You're having chats with each other. You're having that human connection side of things going on before you kick off. Now, the amount of times I come onto these Teams meetings and straight away it's like, what do you got to talk about? Straight away it's into the technical aspects of this call and there's no human connection side and that's gone. And it doesn't take long. We came on this call, didn't we, Dean? It was an element, how was your weekend? How was your morning? That's all it takes. That's fierce care in action because that's showing you care about, oh, I'm talking to Dean rather than this guy who's a podcaster talking about elephants, There's a human connection going on here. And whenever there's a human connection, find the time to put care into it. There's always time. And then your productivity. There was a wonderful book by a lady called Nancy Klein called Time to Think and More Time to Think. Business meetings, etc. Find the time at the beginning of it to go around the room and just make that human connection first. Means meetings go a lot better and a lot more productive and you get much more sort of productivity out of it.
So Tony, I think we're coming towards the end of this session. I just want to shift the lens just a little bit. We've been talking a lot about care internally. What about care externally? So, Kelly's are experts in supply chain risk and management and information. And so I just want to do a little bit of a pitch for them. But I'd imagine this whole idea of caring across your supply chain, your external stakeholders, is just as relevant as caring internally for your internal people.
Yeah, I mean, care is not just an internal thing. It's vital within, but it's all your stakeholders that you're involved in. That includes your customers and it includes your clients, but also so upwards in your supply chain, obviously, as well, but definitely downwards. And how can, yes, absolutely, with Achilles. One thing we always share with flying, and I think you guys in business have a very similar sort of terminology, we call it situational awareness in flying. So I talked earlier about it's decision-making under pressure, whether you're on a rugby field, in an aeroplane, or in a boardroom. It's the same thing. And now we talked about it earlier about the beauty of your approach with the elephants is how can you be proactive about thinking about what could go wrong down the road, but also not can go wrong or change what will change, because it doesn't have to go wrong. And that's what I love about what you do. It's risk and opportunity. If you're able to sort of have a think about what could change down the road and look at it as a risk and an opportunity, it's a wonderful position to be in. Now, having visibility of your situation, and that's what Achilles is just wonderful at giving to that visibility about what's going on in your supply chain. Now, what's fierce care in your supply chain? Fierce care is understanding that better than they probably do and helping them with maybe some of your decision making that's ultimately going to help you up top of the supply chain to be able to recognize that, do you know what, I've got this supplier over here that I can see he's having this problem. I've got that supplier who's giving me the same stuff. I better share this information with each other. That kind of, we call it risk and performance management. It's being able to make those decisions with the best data and the best information that you possibly can, so that it just makes your decision making a lot more a lot better quality. So a lot more robust, a lot more resilient, and a lot more high performing. That's what a high performing team is, just making better decisions under pressure.
Tony, it's been fantastic having you on Elephants in the Boardroom. We could carry on with this conversation, I think, for the rest of the afternoon. Get a glass of wine and
definitely a pinotage would be nice. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Graham was talking about earlier in the call. He was talking about how Africa could become the continent that feeds the world, and that 60% of arable land this is available in Africa to turn into farming. And we were a little bit concerned that at the moment Africa does tend to spoil quite a lot of the food produce that it creates. We were a little bit worried that does this extend to the wine farms in Stellenbosch? But we thought there was probably limited amounts of spoilage of wine. So next time, let's get a glass of wine and let's carry on with this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. It's really great speaking to somebody who, as a really big sports fan, one of the legends that I enjoyed watching over the years. Thank you for that entertainment, but thank you for just giving us some insights into what a life that is filled with transitions and sort of next step thinking looks like. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Graham. I think well, you touched upon it with the difficulties we all face, and as I reiterate, I just love the approach you guys have, because it's just so synonymous with what a high-performing team would be doing in a rugby environment. So the way you've translated that into the business world, just hats off to you. I think it's the way to go. I shared with Dean, but there's this thing called the Lions Laws that we did in the '97 tour when we did beat you guys down there. But there was this element of, before we even set off, how do we get ourselves ready to face the challenge we're going to do down there? And we spent that time considering it. What you guys is that capability for organizations to do that. It led to success for us down there, and I'm sure it will lead to a lot of success for your organizations as well. So hats off to you, and just love what you're doing. Brilliant.
Elephants in the Boardroom is brought to you by our friends at Achilles. Achilles is a sustainable supply chain risk management company. They support the world's biggest companies to create and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent supply chains. While we navigate our way through the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles are leading the way, helping businesses navigate the risks and opportunities associated with many of these grey elephants. So if you're a person who is interested in the impact of change on your supply chains or your ESG strategies, it's worth speaking to Achilles. Head over to achilles.com and tell them we sent you.